Hi guys, welcome to the stream. I'm the Revolution. Welcome to the Information Revolution. Today's topic, we're going to be talking a little bit about chemtrails, and we're also going to be talking about some things that are kind of associated with and linked in with chemtrails. Mostly right now that's going to be Morgellons, cloud seeding, weather manipulation, the difference between a chemtrail and an aircraft contrail. Oh no, we're dropping a lot of frames. What's happening? You know what? One sec. We're going to restart the stream real quick. Okay, looks better. Okay. Sorry, this is attempt number 2, because the previous one I was dropping a lot of frames. Welcome to the Information Revolution, guys. I'm the Revolution, or you can call me Seamus, either way. Today we're going to be talking about chemtrails, chemical contrails, some other stuff that's tangentially related to those, like Morgellons disease, weather seeding, or weather control, cloud seeding, just a bunch of weird, interesting shit like that. That's going to be very exciting. This is a topic that I personally am very, very concerned about. I have been down the most insane, obnoxious rabbit hole over the last couple of days. Just getting all of this information together and like trying to learn all about all the various different things that people think about chemtrails and contrails, and it's very involved. You know, you look at some of the classic conspiracies, right? Like there's a group of conspiracies that you would consider to be like core conspiracies. You know, there's like 9/11, aliens, government mind control, MK Ultra, Project Blue Book, like all these different little subjects, and chemtrails is right up there. You know, chemtrails is like top of the fucking charts for like all time most discussed conspiracy, right? It's a classic. And, you know, as with any classic, you get a lot of people that want to put their own little spin on it. And so, in the process of researching for this video, I've been down some fucking rabbit holes, dude. Like, I thought I knew a lot about chemtrails before I started doing this research. And holy shit, do I know a lot about chemtrails now. I just want to give a quick shout out to my favorite, Sophia Smallstorm. She put out a documentary that's been on YouTube for over 8 years now, called what is it called? Chemtrails and the Dark Side of Biology, where she talks about how chemtrails are raining Morgellons particles down on the planet. Super good video, super great. That was the start, right? That's where I started. Where I end up is a fucking nightmare. So let's get right into it, shall we? What are chemtrails? Now, chemtrails are a conjunction, or a portmanteau, I guess, of the word chemical and contrail. Now, what a contrail is when an airplane is flying at a high altitude, right? The water vapor in the air hits the wings of the aircraft, and then the aircraft's wings are shaped in such a way so that water goes down the line of the wing to the tip of the wing, and then comes off the tip of the wing. Now this forms small, thin, little, beautiful little clouds of water vapor in the air. And the difference between a contrail and a cloud is that clouds require two things to form. Clouds require water vapor, but they also require something called a condensation nuclei. And what that is that's usually like tiny little bits of dust and particles and just tiny little things that manage to fly up into the upper atmosphere just through natural causes. You know, clouds, everybody thinks they're just water, but you know, they're made of some other stuff too. There's little tiny bits of dust and stuff in there that act as the catalyst for creating clouds. Now, because aircraft contrails do not have condensation nuclei in them, those trails dissipate very quickly. Now, if you've ever looked up and seen a jet plane flying by, you'll see that it does have these tiny, like, thin little trails behind it, and they're very cute. But they kind of dissipate after like maybe 3 or 4 aircraft lengths. So like if you're looking up and it's really, really far away, you'll see the aircraft, and then maybe the contrail will continue out to about here. You know, it's proportional to the size of the aircraft. They dissipate very quickly. They don't stick around long. Now, the whole controversy behind chemtrails versus contrails is that a contrail is always going to form at the tips of the wings or some other natural point on the plane where the moisture is going to like wick off the plane naturally. It's never going to form under the wings of the plane. But what we're seeing a lot with chemtrails is that the clouds are coming off the middle point of the wings or out the back of the plane entirely. So what we're seeing instead is completely different than what we would expect to see with a regular contrail. Now, chemtrails. What are the chemicals in chemtrails? What is the chemical component? And the answer to that is it really depends on which of these theories you want to believe. So, the first question you need to ask isn't what's in the chemtrails, it's who is spraying the chemtrails. And then each answer to that question will have its own answer to what is in the chemtrails, and then each answer to what is in those chemtrails will have their own answer to why they're spraying them. It's like a flow chart. It's very complicated. So, who is spraying the chemtrails? Now, obvious scapegoat is going to be our best friends, the New World Order, previously referred to in my other videos as the satanic vampire pedophile Illuminati, because that's essentially what they are. So from this point onwards, if you've been watching the past 2 videos, I'll be referring to that Illuminati as the New World Order, because that's just a lot more concise than saying vampire, immortal vampire, satanic pedophile Illuminati, because that's so many words. So there's also the other possible candidates are the regular ass federal government and the military, or the military CIA. So you've got a couple different candidates for who's spraying. Now, what are they spraying? Now, if you believe the New World Order theory, then what they are spraying is it's water vapor, because it is clouds, but inside that vapor is aluminum, barium, strontium, and then here's the wild cards. Here's the parts that those 3 things, scientific tests have been done on air and water samples, and those 3 chemicals have been found under chemtrail, like frequent flyer chemtrail sites, but not under structures that have been there for a long time. So, for example, if you own a house and you notice all your plants are dying and you've got a lot of chemtrails overhead, you test your soil, right? And your soil's very high in barium, strontium, and aluminum. And then you say, well, that's weird. I know for a fact I didn't settle somewhere that has 10,000 times the government allowed amount of aluminum in the soil. And then you test the soil under where your house was built. You test the soil under your foundation. And that soil is perfectly normal. There's no aluminum, there's no barium, there's no strontium, which says that those chemicals are coming down from above, right? So those are the chemicals that are in the chemtrails no matter what. Like every one of these theories, except for the later ones that we'll talk about, the weather control theories, say that those chemicals are in these chemtrails. So those ones we're going to take as for granted right now. The next thing is something referred to as Morgellons fibers. Now, Morgellons is a medical condition that the establishment refers to as delusional parasitosis, which I'm sure you can deconstruct from the name means that you have the delusion of having parasites. So people who have Morgellons are experiencing strange fibers growing out of their body. They're experiencing itching under their skin, and then when they scratch, it'll be like fibers coming out of their skin, and like weird, like crystalline, like almost glitter-like structures that are all hexagonal, and the fibers can then grow out of these hexagons. And we have all this shit on video. This shit is insane. So those are what the fibers are, right? They're carbon nanofiber particles that are partially organic and partially not organic, and they seem to be part of some sort of nano machine project. Very strange. We're gonna get into that later because that's crazy. Yeah, exactly. So Dinosaur in chat says that she had like weird hexagon glitter show up on top of her skin out of nowhere multiple times through moving apartments and working at a different job. So it comes from your body, from within. It's not like, oh, there's just glitter here, what do you know? It's coming out of your body. And they're not pieces of glitter. What they are is they're actually tiny crystals, because crystals, when they're cut in certain ways, in certain shapes, they respond to different frequencies of vibration and different amounts of electricity, and they can be used as parts of these greater nanostructures. So the glitter and the fibers are important pieces of what's going to be going on further on in this video. So the next item in the Morgellons / kind of population control sphere of what's in these chemtrails is desiccated red blood cells. So people are reporting that when they take samples of what's coming down from these chemtrails, they're finding dried, dead human red blood cells. Why are human red blood cells raining from the sky from planes? That's insane. That should not be happening en masse, but it is if you believe these people. And then the final item in the New World Order chemtrails is pathogens. So this theory states that part of the agenda behind the chemtrails is that they're trying to weaken our immune systems over time by constantly bombarding us with different weak pathogens, so that instead of our immune system beating a pathogen, then getting an immunity to it and becoming stronger, we're just constantly being knocked down bit by bit by bit by a constant barrage of pathogens. Now, the other, and this is the weirdest one, is the last thing that's in there, and I don't know which theory this belongs to, is coal ash. And coal ash is the chemical byproduct caused from burning coal for power, right? So you get your coal, you burn it, that heats the water, which turns the turbine, which gives us energy, right? It spins a magnet around copper, and who cares? Generators, they work. But what do we do with all the ash from all of these coal plants? Well, apparently the federal government moves it all to secret locations beside runways and near military bases with runways. And the coal ash goes into the chemtrails. And coal ash is a carcinogen. Coal ash causes very rare types of cancer. So there is actually a coal ash documentary about a town in Georgia that the coal ash is getting put into their groundwater, and everybody in that town uses well water. So it's actually finding its way into their tap water, and it's causing very rare types of blood and stomach and skin cancer. It's terrible. So coal ash in the chemtrails to give you weird fucking cancers. Now, in the New World Order theory, why are they spraying? Now, the New World Order is the same kind of people who put together the Georgia Guidestones, which are saying that the population of the world should be kept under 500 million people at all times to live in harmony with nature. So they're doing this so that they can slowly over time lower the population or weaken the population to a point where they can kill them by releasing some sort of super pathogen. So, not saying it's coronavirus, because everybody knows the Chinese did this one on accident, but instead, this is being done slowly over time by weakening us, by giving us diseases, by lowering our immune systems, and just generally weakening us as a population, so that when they're ready to, they can knock us all out at once. It's causing cancer, it's causing diseases, and I spent like 2 hours watching videos from guys who do something called sun gazing, where they essentially just stare directly into the sun to like absorb healing energy from it. And like, sure, you know, if that's what you want to believe, I'm all about the sun. I love the sun. I'm 100% for it. But they're saying that the chemtrails are also creating a film in the upper atmosphere that lowers the amount of like healing energy coming from the sun. So that's another little tidbit to throw in there with that theory. And the final one is, of course, they're using it to distribute these Morgellons particles, which they then let incubate in people, and then later they somehow harvest, so that they can use these Morgellon structures for whatever they were designed for. Because you don't design self-replicating nanostructures without something that you want done with them, you know? The government wouldn't create self-replicating nanostructures without some manner of plan of what to do with them or what they need them for. So obviously they have some sort of harvesting mechanism for how to get these fibers and other structures, because they form some other structures. There's some weird fucking structures being formed by these things. Now, if you believe that the government is distributing these chemtrails, then you're going to believe that the aluminum, the barium, and the strontium are in there. Maybe the Morgellons are in there. Maybe the red blood cells. But the most important thing is that a study found that because of the amount of contrails that are in the air, it's actually lowering the effect of global warming, because what happens is, for global warming to work, obviously, light hits the Earth, its energy is like in the atmosphere, right? And it turns into heat, right? Light, heat, they come from the sun. But the chemtrails hanging in the upper atmosphere as like a haze deflect a certain amount of that light, lowering the overall heat that the planet receives, and thus slowing the effects of global warming. Now, this theory says if they ever stopped spraying the chemtrails, global warming would immediately turn up by a shit ton, and we would all fucking die. So, if that's the answer, then the government essentially has recognized that there's a huge fucking global warming problem, but won't come out and say it. And either the military or the CIA or any other alphabet organization, FBI, not the FBI, they don't have fucking jets, the DOJ or any of these Homeland Security, any of these organizations that have access to large amounts of jets and runways and secret funding and shit, they would then be responsible for maintaining this sort of chemtrail fog over the planet to prevent global warming from accelerating. And I think that's a really crazy ass theory because, one, the government wouldn't want to release that information because it would send people into a panic. Two, they wouldn't want to release that because that's obviously not a sustainable solution. And three, they don't want to admit that global warming is real. Duh. Now, so we've gotten into the different groups of who is spraying, and we've gotten into the different possibilities of what they're spraying. But what are the consequences of bombarding the environment and people and, you know, essentially just imagine all of America is essentially under a constant particle rain of aluminum, barium, strontium, desiccated red blood cells, Morgellons fibers, and pathogens, maybe. So the consequences for this are mass plant and animal die-offs. Trees cannot grow in soil that is too heavy in aluminum. Most commercial crops cannot grow in soil that is heavy in aluminum. So this creates a space for GMO crop and plant organizations such as Monsanto, literally Satan the corporation, to step in and say, hey, we heard you guys are somehow, for some reason, having some sort of problem with aluminum. Well, hey, guess what? We just so happen to have a genetically engineered species of tree, corn, strawberries, whatever the fuck you want, and it's completely resistant to aluminum. But it doesn't reproduce naturally, so you're going to have to keep buying it from us every year. And anytime you want more, we make more money. So I honestly would not put it past Monsanto somehow being in charge of this spraying program in order to essentially kill all the plants and animals and trees and shit so that they can then swoop in and replace them to fix the problem, right? So you would essentially be killing every forest and replacing it with perfect little grid of genetically identical, genetically engineered aluminum resistant trees. And the worst part is that these products already exist on the market. If that is the final goal of the chemtrail program, it's already over. Like, it's done. The forests are going to die off from continued exposure to aluminum, and Monsanto already has the aluminum resistant trees ready to go. So it's just a matter of time if that's the case, and then they can just claim, oh, well, it was due to industrial pollution or a byproduct of the way that we do something that we didn't realize until now was killing all the trees, and the chemtrails will never actually be blamed for it. Because, as I discussed in the first episode, you never want to tell the crazy conspiracy people that they were right, because that gives them credibility and slowly erodes the ability to use the term conspiracy theory to immediately shut down any argument or thought train that you don't like. So it also serves a goal that the New World Order and or the government interchangeably would love, because if it is impossible for you to grow your own food without getting those seeds from Monsanto, it's impossible for you to live off the grid. It becomes completely impossible for you to live outside of society, for you to slip away and go anywhere and do anything. Because imagine trying to live in a cabin in the woods, and then the entire woods die off, and you can't grow your food anymore, and you can't catch any animals because they're all gone. You don't get to live in the wilderness anymore. You can't escape. So now you're trapped in society with everybody else, and then they crack down and do the population control thing, and then you die. So that is also another reason for the aluminum spraying, because it forces everyone to either die off or conform to society. It also forces you to rely on the government, because for example, farmers right now, right, they're already kind of struggling. They rely on government subsidies. Now, what if the government said, no more subsidies, farming is gone, all the farms go out of business, and then the government steps in. Oh, hey, guess what? Now the government only allows Monsanto to produce food. So now Monsanto's making a shit ton of money. The government doesn't have to worry about anyone stepping out of line, because they now control the entire food supply for the entire nation, if not the world. Because the U.S. does export a lot of food, one. And two, biofuels. We grow so much corn specifically for making fuel, and this would essentially give the government a complete monopoly on food, fuel, and where everyone lives, giving them total control, which, if you're familiar with the New World Order theory, is everything that they have ever wanted. All they want is control so that they can kill you off later. So clearly this advances the agenda on the Georgia Guidestones of keep the population under 500 million. Now, what it also does is it creates a sustainable source of the Morgellons fibers and the Morgellons crystals and the other structures that people with Morgellons produce, because now everyone is essentially gathered into the cities. They can be the fibers can begin being harvested, and you have all these people across the country who have this disease. And the thing about Morgellons is doctors have a playbook that says if they bring in a little plastic baggie of things that they say they've pulled out of themselves, it's delusional parasitosis. Give them antipsychotic medicine. Don't give them antibiotics or anything else. I'm not even sure antibiotics would work, since these are nanomachines. But essentially, it's such a prevalent condition that medical professionals are actually aware of it and have been advised to essentially just tell you that you're delusional, or that you're implanting these things under your skin yourself and then pulling them out later, which is insane. Because if you've seen the video of some of these patients, they just have regular fucking skin, right? There's no scars, there's no cuts, there's no anything. Sorry, those are my elbows popping, if you could hear those. But essentially, they'll just have weird, long fibers coming out of them that they can tug on, and they don't come out because they're embedded in the skin. It's crazy. Also, people have had clusters of crystals, and also the fibers are black and blue and red, and they just don't make sense to have grown out of the human body themselves or been implanted there. They're very strange structures. Now, a lot of people have written their congressmen and asked what is going on with all of these trails that I'm seeing above my city, above my county, and even the congressmen don't know what the hell is going on. And when the congressmen have been asked, oh, can you find out what the hell is going on, they've been told, well, they're just going to lie to me too. Basically saying that the CIA or the military are not full of elected officials. They are not beholden to the people in the same way that a congressman is. I know we all like to shit on politicians, but they do still have to get elected at some point, Like, as much as you may hate this or that politician, they still are beholden to their voters in their home state, you know? Someone is still giving them agency. These people that are responsible for the spraying programs are not elected officials. They can just sit there for the rest of their lives and hold down their jobs and keep spraying you and never ever have to worry about selling you the program, you know? They have the funds for these programs are most likely not coming through Congress. Everybody in the conspiracy kind of community recognizes that the military has what's called a black budget. That is money that they have obtained or laundered themselves. The CIA especially has a huge black budget, and if you don't know the history of the CIA, they mostly get it by importing and addicting communities to various drugs and narcotics. That's just documented fact at this point. And they do this so that they don't have to run their insane secret programs by Congress. So there are a lot of possibilities of like where this money for these programs are coming from, because you're running planes 24/7 all across the country, possibly across the world. Not to mention the cost of the aluminum, barium, strontium. Who knows how much Morgellons nanofibers cost to develop, not even to produce at the scale that we're seeing them at. So, like, it's definitely either the military or the CIA that's doing this. They're the only people that have the financial resources required. Now, the reason that more people don't have Morgellons, despite the fact that we're all being exposed to these fibers and structures and whatnot on a daily basis, is because not everybody gets infested with them. You know, you can breathe those fibers in, you can accidentally drink or eat them, and they'll pass right through you. But some people, something about their biology is just ever so slightly different, to the point where the fibers can't pass through them, and they start building up from within that person and making their way to the skin and then erupting out. The doctors who have looked and haven't diagnosed it as delusional parasitosis have said that these fibers look like they are erupting from under the skin. So it's very strange. Let's see. Oh yeah, the other thing is that people have cross-referenced like how many chemtrails they're seeing per day versus like where and how often the commercial flights are. And there are more chemtrails over the country per day than there are commercial flights. And they're not even going in the same direction. Like, when you look at some of the pictures that we see of these chemtrails, they're doing like crazy like cross patterns and like checkerboarding effects over the entire sky in some regions. Usually over like rural farm areas, they'll do insane amounts of like parallel lines and then intersecting them at right angles. It's very strange. And in my personal experience, I actually, before the quarantine, when I would go to work, I live close enough to an airport that when I'm waiting for my train, I can look at the sky, right? And I can see a perfect little line of like 5 or 6 planes all coming in on their descent to land at the airport that I live near, right? So I can see the travel path of these planes as they're coming in to land. And the travel path of those planes does not line up at all with the chemtrails that I see over my city. Another thing that is very strange about the chemtrails is that now that everybody is indoors, Now that there's no one outside, there are no chemtrails. I went outside today because I needed booze. I looked up just to check, because I've been on a crazy fucking binge of these theories and trying to understand what's going on. And I looked up and it was a perfect blue sky. Not a cloud anywhere in the sky. Not a single chemtrail anywhere to be seen. And what do you know? It's because everyone's inside. So if everyone's inside, it's a waste of money to douse the entire population in aluminum and barium and strontium. Now, we're also seeing an increase in the amount of chemtrails in the sky before intense weather fronts. So we're talking stuff like record-breaking thunderstorms and rainfall. So this actually kind of ties into one of the more innocuous theories about chemtrails that I could see as being plausible. We talked before about condensation nuclei and how clouds can't form without something to form around. They need a dust particle, or they need they need something in the sky to be able to begin accumulating. Now, anybody will tell you that in the 1950s, we began experimenting with something called cloud seeding. And cloud seeding is when you specifically send condensation nuclei up into the sky so that clouds will form and cause rainfall. Now, one moment. The most common condensation nuclei used is silver iodide. And silver iodide, totally harmless. There are no... The concentration of it, like, once it comes back down, is like... I think it's 12 parts per million. It's so minuscule. It doesn't affect anything. It's totally harmless. And cloud seeding in that instance is actually done from the ground. So I think it was the state of Oregon actually pays a couple $1 million a year to a company that in the winter, what they do is they turn on these big towers, and the towers have a propane tank, a tank of the what do you call it? The condensation nuclei, the silver iodide, the dust. And what they do is they burn the propane so that the silver iodine rides the hot air from the burning propane up into the sky. And then what that does is that gives all of the moisture that's latent in that area something to condense around, and it causes, because they're doing it in the winter, it causes snowfall. And so what they do is they use this as a way to increase their precipitation in winter so that it replenishes the groundwater for summer and spring. Because what's happening is the rainfall, the natural rainfall in the area, is not enough to replace the amount of groundwater that they use each season. So if they just let it go and go and go, eventually there would be no groundwater left under the state for them to use. So by increasing this through a harmless cloud seeding project, they're making it more sustainable for them to do sort of the kinds of farming and the kinds of other things that they do with their water. Obviously, they have cities, they have people, they need water to support that, And so one of the thoughts is that this is just a very aggressive cloud seeding project, because clouds could form around these chemicals that they're putting in the air. And the other thing is that people are noticing that chemtrails actually hover in the sky for up to like a day or two at a time, and they don't go away. What they do is they spread out and become like this thin gray sheet that blocks out all the sunlight. But what it could also be doing is the chemtrails are here, right? And then the condensation slowly forms around them as they slowly spread out, which is creating these huge puffy gray clouds. And that, one, bounces heat back into space so that we get less global warming, and two, causes more rain so that the groundwater is replenished across the U.S. so that we don't suffer like a major super drought. So that is one possibility behind what's happening as well, is that it is a program meant to increase the amount of precipitation so that we don't have some sort of super drought. But, you know, maybe silver iodide's a little too expensive, so they're using some other stuff, and oh no, what do you know, it also serves our other agenda of killing all plant life. Also interesting is, in recent years, the 5th leading cause of death in the United States is chronic lower respiratory disease. And it has no known cause. Gee, I sure hope it's not from breathing in aluminum, barium, and strontium. Or perhaps some sort of mild government-engineered pathogen designed to take out our immune systems. So, there's just so many things wrapped up in this theory, you know? It serves so many of the stereotypical globalist and what are the other words I'm looking for, like New World Order agendas, that it really makes sense, you know? Because if you look at it this way, right, there's more chemtrails than there are commercial flights, so they can't be from commercial flights. And also, I don't know about you guys, but I look up into the sky and see commercial flights very, very high in the sky all the time, and they don't have chemtrails behind them. The only time I see chemtrails are from non-passenger flights that are very, very high up. So I don't know what that's about. Let's see. What else do my notes say? Oh, I hit all my talking points. Very nice. I mean, one of the things to talk about is, like, if it isn't sinister, you know, if it is to increase our rainfall or to stave off global warming, why aren't they just telling us, you know? Why isn't this pitched to society as like, hey, we're the government, we're doing you guys a solid and not letting you all die horribly? Is it the same kind of thing with UFOs where if we tell you and you take it wrong, there will be a panic? And at this point, I don't think that it really would be. It's just a very strange question of, like, why is this happening? Why aren't more people questioning what's going on? And, like, what is actually happening? Because if there's one thing that I know, if there's one thing that I know about conspiracies, right? It's something that I talked about in the first episode. It's that there is an actual truth behind it, right? Now, let's say that there is something actually happening, right? Which I'm likely to believe that there is something happening with chemtrails. What you do is you take what's actually happening and you cut it into like 8 or 9 different little pieces. You take each of those pieces and you give it to different stories, and then you just let the public have all the crazy conspiracy theories, each one of which has a tiny, tiny little piece of something true attached to it, so that when these theories come out, the government can just be like, I don't even have to respond to this because this one was fake, so this one is fake, so this one is fake, so that one is fake. And they can just kind of blanket dismiss all information in any of the theories, despite each of the theories containing a tiny little piece of what's actually true. So why don't we take a look at it together and try to piece it together, from the ground up. So we know that it would be very expensive to maintain this program, which means one of three people are doing it: the military, the government, or the obscenely wealthy billionaires, right? Like, we're talking like stupidly wealthy, like throw money away on pointless bullshit. So those are our three options for who's doing it. Now, the second question is, why are they doing it? So we have a few theories. They're doing it for population control. They're doing it to save the environment. They're doing it to kill the environment so that they can sell us a new environment. Or they're doing it to prevent global warming from killing us all. So let's say that there are pieces of the truth in these theories, right? Then I think the most likely is that they're doing it to weaken the population so that we're easier to control, but also they're doing it to stave off the effects of global warming. So we have three possible candidates. Who would want both of those things? Probably the government, and probably super wealthy, disgustingly powerful billionaires. So that's putting us squarely in the New World Order camp, right? Next, what's the easiest thing to believe being in the chemtrails? Do we want to tack on the whole thing about the Morgellons and the nanomachines and all that? Or is it easier just to believe that it's water vapor, aluminum, barium, and strontium? Unfortunately, as much as I like the Morgellons thing, it's easier just to believe that it's those chemicals and possibly also the coal ash. So we're gonna add that on there, and that kind of tells us like that there are like what is their agenda? If the agenda is to adhere to the Georgia Guidestones, which tells you to live in harmony with nature, leave room for nature, then I think what's happening is pretty much falling in line with that. I mean, they're going to replace the entire environment, but they're also going to lower human population dramatically. So, you know what? There is one theory that I didn't cover. Where was it? There was one theory left. Oh, okay. Last theory. I forgot about this one because it's so boring and dumb. When you see the aircraft creating contrails, right? Just water vapor off the tips of the wings. The lower the altitude and the higher the humidity, the shorter the It's the higher the humidity and the lower the altitude, the longer the contrail stays around. The higher the altitude and the lower the humidity, the shorter the contrail is. So the short contrails that we're seeing are very, very high up with low humidity, and the long-lasting, day-long contrails that we're seeing, are lower in the atmosphere with higher humidity, which explains why they stay around so long. That theory is super boring, and it also doesn't explain lots of the video that we have of aircraft taking off and the chemtrails starting like just off the fucking runway and then turning off and then turning back on when they get higher up in the sky. it also doesn't, like, we have lots of whistleblowers, actually, who have come forward saying, I used to work on a army base, or I used to work as a mechanic for a commercial airline, and the engineers who work on the different systems of the plane all have like a sort of hierarchy. Like, you're hot shit if you work on the flight controls, and then under them are like the internal stuff, and then the people who work on just the wings and engines are under them, and so on and so forth. But the lowest bottom rung are the people who work on the waste disposal system, so the poop tank, essentially, that just is from the bathroom on the aircraft. Nobody wants to be that guy. But they subcontract out, like, the emptying of the tank. And so what that does is there's a tank that comes off the plane. Like, so you know how they have the fuel carrier, right? That goes up to the plane while it's on the runway and attaches to the plane and refuels. Well, they have another one that comes up and attaches to the plane and empties the waste tank, right? And the mechanics that work on the waste tank and the waste system, nobody talks to them, and nobody wants to, do their job. So that system is essentially, nobody ever looks at it. And so it's been said by a few whistleblowers that the waste tank mechanics are actually the people who are responsible for maintaining the chemtrail generator system, and that the waste tank in the schematics is much larger than it is in reality, because that's where they store the chemicals during the flights to disperse as they fly over. So what's happening is when that tank comes up to attach to the plane to drain the waste, it's got two hoses in there. One is draining the waste, sure, but the other one is refilling the chemtrail tanks. It's happening. Of course, there's also the thing about the military bases that have runways all having coal ash depositories near them. Maybe the coal ash is what's being refined into the chemtrail material, right? Maybe, I don't know. And that's why the government is buying up all the coal ash and distributing it. So, like, there's... logistically, it does make sense. Like, if that's actually what they wanted to devote this much resources to, it makes sense, and it's very scary. And I've been down this rabbit hole for 4 days, doing nothing but playing Dragon Quest and watching chemtrail videos, and it's very scary. Like, most video, like the Mandela Effect video, by the end of it, I was like, and here's the very reasonable version that kind of explains everything and makes it so that you don't have to worry about this at night. You don't have that here. You should be terrified. I'm terrified. You should be absolutely in fear of what the fuck is happening. Yeah. Very, 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 very scary stuff. I don't know what to make of it, other than the argument for chemtrails makes more sense, The argument against chemtrails is just that different altitudes and humidities of plane cause different chemtrails to stay around for longer. And, like, yeah, I guess, but then why are there so many, Why are they constant? Why are they... like, it seems to be regardless of the weather conditions that we get these chemtrails, So, I don't know. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me that it wouldn't be some conspiracy. I think the best thing to do is start listening to whistleblowers a little bit more. But yeah, I think I'm going to end it here, guys. I'm a little freaked out about this. I've been The Revolution. Thank you guys so much for watching. Like the video, comment on the video, tell me which group you think is spraying, what you think they're spraying, and why you think they're spraying. Because those are honestly the only parts of this conspiracy. You know, it's a who, a what, and a why. You got your motive, your opportunity, and your suspect. That's the only thing, you know. So, like, comment, and subscribe. I'm The Revolution. If you have another video idea that you'd like me to cover, if you have a favorite conspiracy, and you want to see like all the different perspectives on it and why people believe in it, let me know. I would love to do a video on it. Thank you guys so much.